Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Quick update. The series What If Transmigrated into One Piece and became a Marine will be going on hold soon, since we're nearly at the end of the story. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if creating the strongest Strawhat crew by reading manga? What if a venerated soul reincarnated in Danmachi world? What if transmigrated and taking over Ichigo's body? Please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next. I'll take the top pick and start working on that series next. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 331, End of the Battle. Third Person POV. Uzushiogakure, Year 42. Retreat. We have to retreat. Seeing that Minato didn't seem to be making progress in exterminating them, Raza gave the order, completely losing his pride at that moment, while he could only bow his head and try to save the rest of his men from this failed attempt against the Uzumaki clan. There was no doubt that no one else remained in Uzushio besides them. Everywhere was silent, which meant they had lost and lost shamefully. Minato stared at Suna's troops retreating toward the sea, most of them sealing their puppets into storage scrolls, while some still controlled their puppets, preparing for any attack. Minato could see tears from Shinobi and Kunoichi as they withdrew, likely mourning the loss of a son or husband in the midst of that battle, a battle they would remember forever and hate Minato and the Uzumakis for eternity. Once again, hatred would be intertwined between the villages. But if it had been the other way around, if Minato hadn't been there with his companions, wouldn't it have been the Uzumaki who were crying? If they could even do so, for if all four nations had won, they wouldn't have shown any mercy to the Uzumaki. Men, women, and children would have been massacred. This was the battle they had sought. Let them go, Lord Minato? Are you sure about this? Mu approached Minato beside Masaki. Minato turned his eyes to him and replied firmly. There's no reason to continue the slaughter. Enough blood for this moment. Let it be so we may gain rewards in the future. Suna will have no choice but to acknowledge that. His serious tone spread silence around them. Many Uzumaki, upon hearing this, seemed to disagree, some crying over blood-covered bodies and red-haired companions or family members in their arms. They too had lost comrades, but they didn't dare voice their dissatisfaction aloud, as the order to let the enemies retreat had been given. Masaki saw that and turned to the ninjas. If this is Lord Minato's decision, we must respect it. He's the one who changed our battle here in the south and brought us victory. Besides what he and his companions must have already done on the other sides of the island. In the end, we are here, we survived. The clan leader spoke. Yes, we survived. Remember that. Mu said while Minato still observed the battlefield. Soon, several healers began to spread across the island quickly, applying first aid. And Suna also acted, sending over 50 clones. Even though the Uzumaki had great healing abilities, they still sent dozens of Suna's clones to help those who were injured, able to use a bit of nature chakra. Minato looked toward the sea, seeing the last remnants of Suna's ninjas advancing toward the horizon. There were traces of destruction everywhere, sunken ships, bodies of dead ninjas and their parts, even the body of the Kraken that Minato had asked Makoto to control with her Sharingan and had made it fight against Suna in that area before they reached the island. The Kraken didn't last long. Despite having the advantage at sea against the sand ninjas, it was eventually brought down after causing some trouble for Suna. Not that it mattered. After all, Minato should have already finished off the Kraken at the Fish Clan. Minato, we won, Databane. Kushina appeared at that moment, emanating Kurama's yellow chakra around her body. Yes, but there are still some things to do. Minato reminded her as he analyzed the entire area before turning his gaze to Kushina once more. Can you apply Kurama's chakra to the wounds that the medical ninjas can't heal?
Medical ninjutsu can't regenerate organs, but your chakra can do even more than that, Minato said. He remembered that if the Kyuubi's chakra could regenerate Naruto's own body, Kushina could also apply it, especially since she knew medical jutsu learned from both Mito and Tsunade of the Senju clan. Kushina looked surprised at this, and Minato could understand.
She didn't know, but that chakra was so powerful that even Naruto, when distributing it, healed people simply by placing Kurama's energy within them. Perhaps, if Kushina focused on the injured areas, she could do the same. You think I can? Kushina asked, still surprised, as Minato appeared beside her and took her hand. Come here, he said, approaching two Uzumaki women, one crying and the other with her abdomen open, in her last moments of life. An Uzumaki ninja had just stood up from beside them, shaking his head, showing he couldn't save her. I want you to try with her. Place your palms and try to release pure chakra, as if you were trying to give it away, right on the wounded area, Minato asked. Kushina thought for a moment before nodding. I'll try, she said, moving closer to what seemed to be two sisters, the younger one crying, mourning the inevitable death of the other. She approached carefully, while the younger one looked at Kushina with sadness and doubt, recognizing her by the yellow glow around her. She must be the Jinchuriki she had heard about, even if she hadn't seen her in action during this war. Since she had stayed on her side, her form was unmistakable. Let me try to do something, Kushina said cautiously. Why? Our medical ninjas already said she can't be saved. Don't mock my sister's final moments, the young woman snarled at Kushina. Let her try. It won't hurt, Minato said as he approached beside his fiancée. I don't know if it will work, but if it does, you might still have your sister alive, he said. Let her try. The weak voice of the wounded woman sounded, her eyes half open. The other nodded, despite her reluctance, as Kushina approached the wound and placed her hands over it. Still enveloped in chakra form, she tried to apply the red chakra. Try to align the chakra with hers. You could distribute the healing energy inside her, suggested a voice within, as Minato showed a small smile, seeing Kurama trying to help Kushina. But she basically failed to distribute her chakra to the Uzumaki, which meant that Kushina would never have the same ability as Naruto to share Kurama's chakra. Seeing that the approach didn't work, Kurama asked her to try releasing pure, raw chakra, but slowly, so as not to injure the dying woman even more. The chakra filtered through, with small bubbles circulating throughout the destroyed stomach area. Some Uzumaki, still trying to recover at the end of the battle, looked on curiously as the Jinchuriki of the fox tried to work on the woman's wound on the ground. It's working! Minato felt it through his haki. The tissues and organs of her abdomen and the destroyed area were beginning to reconstruct under the influence of the chakra. This went beyond medical ninjutsu. Even beyond Tsunade's 100 seals, which could only regenerate one's own body. Even on the brink of death, Kushina could save another person, as she was doing now. Minato! It's working, Databane! Kushina shouted, nervous and agitated, as he approached and placed his hand on her shoulder. Keep going, Kushina. You're saving her life, Minato said. Sister! The other girl, who had been crying beside her, couldn't hold back her scream as she saw the walls of the wound beginning to reconstruct, while the blood was cleansed by the layer of red chakra. How are you feeling? Minato asked the woman directly, as she opened her eyes, losing all the exhaustion that had once dominated her face. I'm feeling better, she said, in disbelief. Sister, I can't believe it. The woman heard that before looking relieved and quickly stood up, tears in her eyes, then turned to Minato joyfully, still crying. You're the one who fought for the entire Uzumaki clan, aren't you? She asked Minato, who only nodded. She simply laughed and hugged him tightly, catching Minato by surprise. Kushina immediately growled, her eyes full of fury as she saw someone hugging her man like that. Thank you. Thank you for saving my sister, the woman shouted in the middle of the embrace. Minato had a confused look, and Kushina was outraged. After all, the one saving her sister was Kushina, who still knelt beside them. Minato was receiving all the credit, but that wasn't even the most important thing to Kushina. What truly infuriated her was the fact that the woman's hands were on her man while she was still trying to heal the sister. You're the great hero who fought against all the forces. I saw you fighting, it was incredible.
You saved my sister too. The woman said, stepping back and pointing at Minato.
I'm going to marry you, she declared excitedly.
Minato grimaced while Kushina choked. What are you saying, you damn woman? Kushina shouted.
At the same time, on the other battlefields, the Uzumaki tried to save as many of the wounded as they could.
There were still some enemies alive, but the order was clear: eliminate them all.
Which, in a way, was an act of mercy, since many of them didn't even have half of their bodies left by their comrades. Even so, the feeling of peace, despite the sadness of losing so many, began to return. The sound of the waves echoed in every corner of the island.
In the end, they had won. We won.
We defeated all the nations, shouted Masaki from the south.
Send word to all battlefronts.
The war is over, and the Uzumaki have once again proven themselves stubborn even against 4 entire nations.
He gave the order.
Quickly, the ships began to leave the area, while both the battlefront and the inner part of the island, where there were bunkers for civilians and non-combatants, erupted in celebration for having survived. Minato managed to free himself from the woman after her strange declaration. Kushina, on the other hand, began surrounding her with adamantine chains, threatening the woman who seemed rather stubborn.
The injured woman's sister punched her in the head, still in shock after nearly dying. What are you thinking? Don't you see he belongs to the woman who saved me, you fool?
I know you want to find a husband, but have some limits and show gratitude, she said to her sister, who immediately bowed her head in shame.
I'm sorry for that, but maybe I could be a second wife.
The woman suggested hopefully, receiving another punch in response. Minato only sighed, Kushina huffed, and he pulled her away before she could try to kill the woman. So it seems it worked. Many of the Uzumaki still need help with chakra. Create several clones and try to save as many people as possible, Minato asked, and Kushina quickly nodded.
I'll do that. Minato, just don't stay near Uzumaki women.
They'll surround you from all corners of the island. I don't want to see my future husband being chased by a crowd of them, she said, pouting and crossing her arms.
You're exaggerating. That won't happen, Minato said skeptically. A crowd of Uzumaki women running after him to propose marriage?
Not that he would agree to any of that, he already had 4 wives.
And that would never happen.
Anyway, Minato nodded as Kushina created more than 100 clones, all cloaked in Kurama's chakra mantle, spreading across the island.
Minato looked at Masaki at that moment.
I intend to launch the final stage of the plan.
The island isn't safe here. I understand.
Please, do it, said Masaki.
Minato glowed and suddenly shot up into the sky in a line of light.
Reaching the necessary height, he checked to make sure no Uzumaki were outside the island, and seeing that everyone was on the shore and the island was practically intact except for the south, where enemies had invaded some clan houses.
He confirmed there were no more enemies nearby. Even so, the place remained vulnerable. What if one of the villages launched a Baijidama from the sea directly at them? Perhaps they wouldn't react in time to prevent the nation's revenge after today's losses.
After all, they had only attempted that attack because they wanted the Uzumaki's secrets.
Minato needed to remove the island from this location.
In the sky, he cut his finger with his own nail in a swift motion and began forming seals with his hands before launching the summoning jutsu. Now, the final stage of the plan. As the smoke quickly took shape, a massive serpent formed in the air, and the boy appeared, the blue dragon. Chapter 332 Uzushiobakure flies into the sky. Third-person POV. Uzushiobakure, Year 42.
Minato. Guren immediately exclaimed after blinking a few times and seeing where he was after being pulled here.
He was in the middle of the sky, in an unknown place. Since it was the first time he had ever seen Uzushiobakure, having never been summoned there before this. When Minato had told Guren about his plan, but with no prior training, being something direct, he decided to personally do what he wanted to do all at once. He never actually showed the place, since Guren was supposed to remain a hidden summon, as he didn't want the villages to know about his dragon without the need to actually show him. Minato landed lightly on top of Guren's nose, while he opened a smile toward the enormous eyes of the blue dragon staring at him. "Hello, Guren," he said, before simply looking down as he could feel several Uzumakis pointing at the sky, shocked, exclaiming and wondering if that was really a dragon like in the legends, or if their eyes were deceiving them. His gaze returned to his companion. "I need to do what we agreed on, Guren. I need to remove Yuzushigakure from here. I intend to place it floating in the sky. Can you do that?" Minato asked, while Guren looked at the island and sensed it. It was much larger than the mountain he had already made float in Mount Mayaboku, but he also trained directly in the land of dragons, far away, on the other side of the world, very distant from the lands of the 5 elemental nations. "Great. Then, please, start removing the island," Minato said as he placed the palm of his hand on top of the dragon's nose, placing a Raijin seal there before disappearing and reappearing beside the clan chief, who was still looking at the sky. The man turned his eyes to Minato. "Is that the dragon you mentioned?" "It's shocking to see one in person," murmured the clan leader, having never actually seen one alive, just like all the Uzumakis. When Minato had told him about his plan, the man had already been surprised by the existence of a dragon, even more so one that was contracted directly by Minato. Minato explained a bit more regarding what he planned, and the leader asked to send ninjas across the island so they wouldn't worry about the dragon, that he was on their side and shouldn't be attacked. Meanwhile, everyone began watching the dragon simply start dancing through the sky as if he were swimming in the air. Everyone began to see him dive into one of the corners of the island, straight into the sea, while he was creating clouds from his small hands which, even if gigantic for a normal human, were small compared to the enormous serpentine body of the dragon. He burst against the water, and the cloud quickly began circling the island beneath the sea. Kushina was spread across the island at this moment. She had created several clones and was also moving around the island, placing the Nine-Tails Fox's chakra in the most seriously wounded, those who could not be treated, while other groups of Uzumaki went to warn the people inside the bunkers within the island. "We won," some Uzumaki shouted as soon as they arrived, appearing before the crowded groups of non-combatants underground, making people immediately stand up excited. "We really won. Is my son all right?" an elderly man shouted, hoping his son and daughter-in-law had survived. "Please, let me see my husband," a woman yelled. "Mom, I want to see Daddy," another child exclaimed, jumping with joy, while an Uzumaki who came to warn them raised his hands. A bit hesitant, he interrupted the sudden euphoria. "I ask you to calm down. We are still dealing with many things, so I need you to remain calm. Every side of the island was somehow affected by the confrontation, so we are working to take care of the destroyed areas. There are fallen enemies, and wounded on our side, and it also seems like the island is about to move, so do not panic with some tremors." That's what leader Masaki said. The red-haired ninja tried to calm the ecstatic crowd. After all, they couldn't leave now. They still needed to organize all the chaos and also care for the wounded. A crowd of civilians out there would only get in the way and be traumatized by enemy and ally bodies spread across the island. People understood and calmed down, but before they could say anything, screams came when they suddenly grew frightened as the island began to shake. "They're already moving," murmured a ninja looking at the trembling ceiling. "Calm down. Think of everyone. This is normal," he said. At the same time, outside, in the water, the enormous dragon was circling the entire structure of the island, with yellow clouds surrounding it in 3 layers, before emerging from the water and beginning to strain as the island trembled with his will, since he had to break the lower part of the island that connected it to the seafloor. Seeing this, someone appeared on his nose, while Minato looked at Guren, alternating his gaze quickly between the island and the dragon. "Hey, Guren, do you need help there?" he said, while Guren clenched his teeth. "It's difficult. If you can send a little natural energy to me, it could help." "I need a few sources to increase my will over the island," he said, while Minato jumped from his head before focusing and beginning to form several hand seals, entering a lotus position, then including a normal seal and starting to gather natural chakra. Minato knew how to absorb chakra through a Fuinjutsu because he had trained this many years ago, very different from that set of seals he used against the Hachibi, which extracted its chakra during the Second War. When he invaded the Sand Village alone, Minato managed to develop new seals. Not only that, he somehow managed to learn how to give his chakra. He wasn't as talented as Naruto, who could perfectly transfer Kurama's chakra among thousands of people, but he could certainly donate chakra to anyone he wanted, even if there was some waste, since he couldn't fit it perfectly. Still, it was a great help. Minato began gathering all the natural energy, sitting in a lotus position, while it was transmitted at the same time to Gurren, as if he were a connector, giving the dragon one more source of chakra in the same way Fukasaku and Shima had been for him. And, despite Minato being quite small compared to the size of the dragon, he didn't fall behind in pulling chakra, since he was naturally very talented at it. The island began shaking even more as Gurren put in more effort, until cracks began circling the entire vast portion of the island, quickly detaching it from the sea. Uzumaki's exclaimed, still somewhat frightened by it, but when they began to see the island rising, all of them felt disbelief as they watched it leave the water, which quickly became chaotic as it tried to fill the hole left by the island right after it rose. The giant toads were disappearing one after another at that moment, no longer seeing the need to stay there. Minato would talk to them later, while the two elder toads remained on the island. Kushina was healing more Uzumakis near the southern coast while looking, shocked, at Suna also healing the wounded near her as the island was finally leaving the sea. She was surprised because, compared to the mountain Gurren had made fly in Mount Mayaboku, this island was much larger, but she said nothing. She only watched everything in admiration. Hanabi looked from one of the corners of the island, watching the sea grow farther and farther away, while storing her bow on her back and returning to the center of the island, not failing to lift her head and look at Minato in the sky, above the dragon. At the same time, Makoto was also jumping between buildings to reach the others, her eyes likewise turned to the sky. Minato had his eyes closed, focused, but at the same time his subconscious didn't stop his observation haki from sweeping everything, and he knew how the Uzumakis were at that moment, analyzing the situation, satisfied that the island was beginning to rise into the sky more and more. Now, with Gurren no longer needing to break it and without the pressure of the sea, it rose quickly, like a balloon. Very well, Gurren. Let's place it hidden in the clouds before deciding what we will do with it. I don't want to keep it down here anymore, Minato said, opening his eyes. Finally, Gurren didn't need his help as much. All right, Minato. From what I can see, you managed to defend the clan you wanted to protect, he said, analyzing the island. The damage was minimal, some fallen enemy bodies scattered around, and many of them stained the water around the island red. There was no doubt for Gurren that this had been a massacre in Minato's favor. Yes. Minato opened a smile for his companion while still looking at the island. That's good. I'll stay up here, then, waiting for you to decide what to do with the island. Let me ask something first, can you keep it in the sky even when you're no longer here? He asked. I can do that, but it lasts only a little more than 3 days. There are dragons who can maintain the clouds for about a week. I'm not at that level yet. But if you want to keep it in the sky, you can summon me every 3 days and I'll renew the clouds, and the island will always remain in the sky. Gurren informed him, and Minato looked gratefully at Gurren's answer. At first, Minato planned to move the island to some distant place, but if Gurren could keep it in the sky, that would be even better. After all, Minato had sensed the Zetsus throughout the entire battle. They had been observing the whole time without making any real movement, only gathering information. Minato wondered what Madara should think about Makoto's Mangekyo, while she hadn't even used the perfect Susanoo, which would drive him insane if he knew the true power of her eyes. At the same time, he should also be aware of Kushina being a perfect Jinchuriki. And of some of the strength Minato used, since he alone stopped many Baijidama from all sides, killed 2 Kage, made 3 Biju disappear, and also eliminated a large portion of the enemy's military power. Truth be told, Minato could have killed Raza and Inoki with some effort, but he didn't. It still made sense to keep them alive. Inoki, despite his tough nature, could be useful in the future. Raza still needed to bring Gaara into the world, who would be a key piece for the future of the Sand Village, and Gaara probably hadn't even been born yet. For that, Raza would need to commit the madness of placing Shikaku inside the boy. Minato had sent the Biju very far away, but that didn't mean Suna wouldn't be able to find it, even if it took some time. At the same time, he eliminated the Mizukage because he didn't sympathize at all with the Bloody Mist, which would be the current regime. Or it would be beginning to develop. Minato didn't know exactly how Kiri's situation was at that moment, but it was probably the beginning of his reign of terror, which would continue with the third, manipulated by Obito. Minato also held a certain anger toward the village of the Cloud. They could be important along with Killer Bee, but Minato's resentment was recent. Those bastards had tried to kidnap Kushina. He didn't think twice before eliminating the Reikage using armament haki. With the strongest form of haki he had at the moment, along with the kenjutsu he had learned directly from Tsukumo Hatake. Not even the lightning armor managed to protect him, especially combined with the absurd speed of the light fruit, which intensified the cut and went through like butter, without any resistance from the Reikage's powerful body. Minato didn't know how everything would unfold now. With the Reikage dead, he could no longer hold back 10,000 stone ninjas for 3 days and 3 nights as in the canonical timeline. But the stone village had also suffered immeasurable losses. And if they still wanted war against Konoha for revenge, even with the evidence that Minato and the others were rogue ninjas or something of the sort, they could still try to blame Konoha for their own losses. They would certainly try to find someone to blame for the humiliation, and might even use Kushina as an excuse, saying Konoha had broken the Kage Council's agreement, since she was a perfect Jinchuriki and was there. Well, I'm going to go take care of things, Guren. Minato spoke again, coming out of his own thoughts about the battle, while Guren nodded. We'll talk again after I have a word with the clan leader, with the elders, and with my fiancés. Just try to place the island inside the clouds. Minato requested, and when Guren nodded, he disappeared the next moment, after the dragon's confirmation. Chapter 333, The Intention of Konoha? Third-person POV. Uzushiogakure, Year 42. Minato gathered with the clan leaders in the main square of the island at its center, while he spoke with Masaki and the other elders. Makoto, Hanabi, Kushina, and Suna were also there, with the last two having their original bodies while their clones were still spread across the island helping heal the wounded. Well, now we just have to take care of the last wounded and clean up the dead. Soon the common citizens will be able to return to their homes, Mu said, while Masaki beside him nodded. The wind from the high altitude they were at filled the island and made most of the red hair sway. Masaki looked at the clouds they were entering before turning back to Minato. Where do you plan to take the island, Lord Minato? He asked. How about leaving the island in the sky? No one will bother you while I'm here. And, since I'm now a ninja without a home. Minato pointed to his scratched headband. And since you no longer have allies, we should stay together. The Uzumaki immediately agreed with his words. You ended up freeing us from a deadly trap created by 4 nations, Lord Minato. You may have even been prepared to marry an important member of the clan like Hashirama many years ago, but there's no doubt that right now, you hold greater prestige than the first Hokage and may consider Uzushiogakure your home, Masaki said at this moment, and all the elders agreed. That's true. Another elder stepped forward. At first, I doubted. I believed I would die along with everyone in the clan, even with your help, something you can't blame me for. After all, of all the reinforcements we received in the end, only 5 people showed up. But now I see how wrong I was. You brought so much power to the clan, created a true miracle. The Uzumaki clan will never forget this debt. Only 2 elders had fallen, 2 out of 10 in total, which included the leader and those who made decisions for the entire clan. Mayo Uzumaki speaks with wisdom, Lord Minato, the clan leader said with a smile toward the blonde boy. Uzushiogakure will never forget this, and I don't doubt that you hold even greater privilege than the first Hokage, even as a friend of the clan. You were the one who abandoned Konoha, your home, to fight for us with courage in your decisions and defended us. He paused, smiling even more sincerely. You and your fiancés will always have a place to live among the Uzumaki, and you will never lack anything, whether food, housing, or even seals in our secrets. The entire clan will be willing to give you whatever you want. I would even hand over the leadership to you, he said, laughing. It was clear that was a joke, at least for the moment. Minato nodded in silence and also opened a smile. Well, I would love to have a place to live for now and also to see some of your techniques. After all, Mito-sama taught me everything about your techniques and foundations, but I'm sure she didn't have all the knowledge of the clan. I'd like to see everything from the simplest and discarded techniques to the most powerful and incomplete ones, Minato said sincerely. It was a unique opportunity to learn new seals the Uzumaki had discarded as impossible to master even for themselves, without even knowing for sure what he might find there. After all, creating combinations of Fuinjutsu must have led to many tests and many failures as well. He wanted to obtain that and maybe develop what the Uzumaki had failed at, if he became interested in the results. Well, that will be provided later and we can celebrate later with everyone gathered, a great feast for our victory, but we have a problem about staying in the sky.
This altitude will certainly harm the more common people of the clan, Masaki said. The wind and even the atmospheric pressure were different from what they were used to. They were over 3,000 meters high, the wind was bothersome, and even the ninjas could feel the difference when breathing that air. A common person could have serious difficulty breathing. Kushina, can't you create a shield around the island? Minato asked. It would be perfect for that. The wind would be blocked and it would stabilize the air and atmosphere through the shield that could block even Baijidama, and Kushina had already done that before. This drew everyone's eyes to the girl. There was no one more suitable to create the shield. What thousands of Uzumaki would take months or even years to do, that girl could create in less than a day. I can do it, Kushina said. With her almost limitless chakra, she began summoning more clones, spreading them across the island quickly to now create the 8-layer protection seal. Most of the Uzumaki were gathered there, while everyone listened to the conversation. Minato and the others could also see Guren in the sky, his serpentine body controlling Izuchiogakure as they entered a huge area surrounded by clouds, to hide from the eyes below. Eyes that certainly wouldn't be few. After all, an island suddenly starting to fly across the 5 elemental nations would be hard to hide from the people beneath them. Minato talked a bit more with the leaders and then returned to Guren, asking him to park the island in a corner of the sky, deciding to keep it there. He would renew the levitation clouds every few days. Since Guren was willing to do it, Minato didn't refuse the suggestion. In the end, a shield was raised by Kushina, and the wind pressing against the island was blocked. Even the air felt much lighter now. The enemy bodies were placed all in a corner of the island, while the clan's casualties had already been placed in coffins prepared by the Uzumaki, now waiting for their families to come and say their farewells. Minato joined his fiancées while Masaki helped move the non-combatant Uzumaki out of the hiding spots. They looked stunned when they realized that the clan's island was in the middle of the sky. It was a strange feeling, but at the same time they noticed that their homes were almost perfectly fine. At least the great majority of them, while some couldn't avoid a bit of damage, not destroyed or anything like that, at least not those outside the south. Just a few houses with some broken parts, roofs, or windows due to uncontrolled jutsu or the attacks Minato had launched together with Inoki at the beginning of the nation's arrival. In any case, families began finding their relatives who had returned victorious from the war, while others, upon learning of the deaths of their loved ones, started crying and running toward the area where they were being buried. There was both sadness and joy on the island at that moment. Even though the clan had been saved in the end, losing family members would never be easy to bear. Even if they needed to celebrate the victory, many did not. Minato could feel the explosion of emotions erupting across the island. He almost felt like Fujitora in Dressrosa, but unlike him, he didn't feel only joy. He could feel the negative emotions as well, especially in the area of the coffins. Minato, are you okay? Minato blinked when he heard Makoto, who looked at him half-worried after seeing him make some grimaces. He just sighed. The negative emotion was a horrible thing to feel, but at the same time he was in the ninja world, he should know that this would be quite normal. After all, he had felt that from his enemies himself. He remembered how A had looked after the third Reikage was killed, hateful eyes, frustration, anger, and even more hatred from the ninjas of Kumo, Kiri, and even Suna. Minato hadn't necessarily fought against IWA at that moment, but their emotions wouldn't be much better, especially after he teleported Inoki away, leaving them without a commander, creating chaos in the IWA army. In any case, Minato looked back at Makoto. "It's nothing, just some thoughts," he said, while she nodded, along with the other girls who also looked at him with concern. The original Kushina looked at Minato as well before blinking, and her eyes widened when she saw someone appear. "Kushina," shouted the woman, making her daughter immediately leave the group and run to her. "Mom! We won, Databane!" Kushina shouted, hugging her mother tightly. "Yes, my Kushina, we won this fight."
"You all won, many things happened just on the way here," her mother said proudly, while beside her an elderly Hyuga man appeared. Hanabi smiled when she saw her grandfather and approached to hug him.
"Grandpa, are you okay?" Hanabi asked, while he opened a smile. "Yes, I'm fine, thanks to you." "I presume," he said.
"We did our part," Hanabi replied with a slightly shy smile. Despite that, she felt deep in her heart that the others had done much more than she did. She felt distant, perhaps the weakest of the four. But she didn't let that affect her at that moment. Now was the time to celebrate. She was there, free from the clan, without the caged bird seal. She and her grandfather were free, in other words, free from the Hyuga, free from Konoha.
Minato stayed there with Makoto and Suna watching Hanabi meet her relatives, while more and more Uzumaki embraced each other to celebrate in that square. Minato boy.
At that moment, the toads Fukasaku and Shima came to him, hopping before landing on his shoulder.
Minato crossed his arms, giving them a smile. "Well, it seems it's over," he said. "It seems so." "Well,
I never imagined the dragon of yours would do something like this," Fukasaku commented, looking at the sky and then at Guren, who was still controlling the island.
"We're going to settle here for now. Guren is capable of keeping us in the sky for a while, and we intend to stay like this. Anyway, it's over.
I need to talk to Jiraiya-sensei now, and deal with things," Minato said with a slightly amused smile. "We wanted to talk about that from the beginning, to be honest," Fukasaku began. "But when you summoned us, we were already in the middle of the war."
Minato raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?"
The toads looked at each other. "Before you came looking for us, we immediately received news from Jiraiya.
We believed you should have called us earlier.
Otherwise, we would have tried to reach you. But there was a response from Konoha with the new leadership, that's what he told us," Shima explained.
Minato couldn't help but feel intrigued. "What do you mean by that?"
he asked cautiously.
"She's saying that Konoha..."
While he was finishing the explanation, deep inside the forests of the Land of Fire, everything seemed calm until footsteps began to shake through the tree branches, thousands of them feeling their trunks vibrate.
Jiraiya was among them, wearing battle-ready armor.
And he was not alone.
Orochimaru, Tsunade, Mizu Uchiha, Shikaku Nara's father, and Tsukumo Hatake himself leading all of them.
All marched at the front of a huge army wearing Konoha vests and headbands, as they approached the eastern coast more and more.
"I hope it's not too late,"
Jiraiya murmured as the Leaf Army advanced. They were coming to try to reverse their terrible decision of turning their backs on an ally. At the same time, 5 Leaf ninjas had defected, not to mention the retired ninja, Hanabi's grandfather, and were fighting alone against 4 nations.
Konoha had made a decision, and now came trying to remedy it. Jiraiya only hoped it wasn't too late.
But as they marched, the island was already moving away, rising higher and higher and disappearing into the clouds.
What Konoha would find there would be nothing but the absence of the island. Chapter 334, Yuzushi Ogakure, disappeared? Third-person POV. Land of Fire Year 42.
A squadron of thousands of ninjas came from the Land of Fire, while the coastline was finally spotted by the ninja leading them. He raised his hand to halt all the troops. More than 10,000 Konoha ninjas were there, with the finest forces of that generation, and his command made everyone stop in their tracks. The moment they halted, Tsukumo simply raised his hand for everyone behind him to cease their movements, since it was now possible to see the sea, still a bit restless, with several smoke lines in the distance on the horizon. The other ninjas behind them all kept their formation. Jiraiya watched with a gleam of anxiety. His students were somewhere out there, and now he was going to help them, while they were probably trying to defend the Uzumaki on their own at that very moment. Now, the village was no longer in the hands of Sarutobi-sensei and the elders.
Konoha had made a different decision this time, and those who had chosen not to take part in the defense of Yuzushiyo Bakure before did not oppose the decision now, likely due to the shame cast upon them, since 5 Konoha ninjas had refused to accept the village's decision and had gone to fight on their own. The rest had remained like cowards, unable to protect their allies. The same look Jiraiya carried was shared by Tsunade Senju, who hoped to find her daughter safe, along with Minato and the other girls. She still had issues with blood, but her determination to protect her daughter outweighed her weakness. At the same time, Orochimaru wore a faint smile. He had not spoken much since the beginning of the mission. He obeyed the village by being there, just as he had obeyed before when they tried to eliminate Minato in the Land of Wind and ended up getting involved in a dangerous game that nearly led him to death. The thought frustrated him a little, and a slight disappointment lingered in his expression. There were others besides the main leaders. Mazu Uchiha hoped to find his daughter well. Or perhaps that was normal and he merely wished to witness the powers that his new eyes granted him, to bring pride to the clan, along with all the testimonies from Konoha itself standing behind him. Nawaki Senju also led the platoon, carrying an air of confidence with his Mokuton arm fully adapted to his body at this point. He was no longer weaker than an elite jonin, since the Mokuton had strengthened even further with chakra, and the adaptation had settled well into his body. He did not possess wood release, at least, not yet, though it was possible that, in the future, he might achieve a level close to what Yamato would have. He did not have the might of Hashirama, his grandfather, but he certainly had enough strength to be an elite with the fearsome wood element. Might Due was also confident, wearing his jonin uniform while standing on a tree branch. He was considered an elite jonin and showed even more confidence around his Konoha comrades, waiting for the commander's order. He was also eager to head into the battlefield, carrying a bit of concern for his friend Minato and his companions. He had trained a bit with the techniques Minato had given him, but a few days were too little to master anything. Still, he saw potential in them. He had already seen how they worked when he fought Minato himself. It was nothing disappointing. He saw great value in them, increasing his own possibilities, being able to fly by stepping on the air, giving small bursts of speed along with his gates. It would be incredible. While trying to completely reach the 7th gate, he nurtured the idea of challenging Minato in the future, because he knew that, physically, in their last battle, he had not been stronger than the boy. Not in his current state. While many carried their own thoughts, several teams began to appear in front of Commander Tsukumo, who led the entire Leaf Village at that moment as temporary leader. The Jonin teams landed. They were the coastal scouts, bowing, while the other ninjas awaited an order. "Tsukumo-sama, you finally arrived, with reinforcements," said one of the ninjas, looking at Tsukumo with a bit of caution. And Tsukumo nodded. "Tell me what is happening. Are they still at war?" he asked with a more urgent and serious tone, while the ninjas looked at one another, seeming a little uncertain. This only made Tsukumo raise an eyebrow. "Tsukumo-sama, actually, I think the battle is over." The outpost commander, who had been there to watch the start of the battle before reinforcements arrived, spoke. This made Tsukumo and everyone behind him widen their eyes, while the entire place fell silent for a moment. "Wait, you're saying the battle is over? It's mid-morning." Only if they attacked at dawn, then, Tsukumo thought. The sun had risen only a few hours ago, 3 at most, judging by its position in the sky. "The truth is that the battle began at sunrise and ended before you even arrived," said the ninja, making the place sink into tense silence. "Another thing we need to report, even if you advance toward the sea, Yuzushiyo Bakure is no longer there," said another ninja from the scouting squad. "What do you mean by that?" Tsukumo tried to remain calm but immediately questioned. "The fight is over, and Yuzushiyo Bakure is supposedly no longer there. What the hell happened?" "It flew, Tsukumo-sama. I don't know how to explain it, but there was a summoning in the sky, long, it looked like a blue-winged snake. It must have done something to the island, since it seemed to pull it toward the sky. The entire clan simply followed it, flying. We saw it from a distance. Even though we didn't see the battle completely, we saw the island rise until it disappeared into the clouds of the sky," said the scout, sounding unsure with such an exaggerated story, but it was still the truth. Tsukumo paused to think for 2 seconds before raising his hand. "We will verify," he said.
Immediately, he advanced, and all 10,000 Konoha ninjas followed him as well, running across the seawater and moving forward together like a V-shaped multitude.
Tell me what you know about the battle, Tsukumo asked the scout who ran beside him.
As they moved, the ninja began reporting all the explosions he had seen, the Baijidama that detonated in various directions without him knowing whether they hit the island or not, and how everything suddenly went silent. They saw IWA retreat, and judging by the silence, it seemed that all the other armies had also fallen back, otherwise, IWA would not have withdrawn without returning.
Tsukumo remained thoughtful as they continued advancing.
When they reached the area, everyone looked upon the trail of destruction.
There was no longer any island there.
No matter how far they walked toward the horizon, all they saw was the sea, still quite turbulent. But nothing of Uzushiogo cure. Even knowing they were in the exact location, this was not an illusion born from the ninja's exhaustion. The island had truly risen into the heavens. And all that remained were hundreds, if not thousands, of ninja corpses scattered across the area where the island should have been, hulls of destroyed ships and many other pieces of debris, with fires burning in some places in the middle of the sea, or even shattered objects still releasing smoke after the war.
We arrived too late.
But there are no Uzumaki bodies, only enemies, Tsukumo said, kicking a flipped-over body and revealing an Iwagakure ninja wearing the red and brown uniform and the stone forehead protector. He was dead with an arrow lodged in his heart, leaving only a hole, since the arrow had pierced straight through due to its immense speed.
This kind of death. I know who did this.
Or at least I know who taught it. Jiraiya appeared beside him, looking at the wound in the chest.
There was no doubt. That was an arrow in the style Hanabi usually used.
It's not as powerful as my students, Jiraiya said to Tsukumo.
But it's certainly her technique. Perhaps she taught some Uzumaki. Can you contact the toads? Minato could have summoned one of them, correct?
And you had left a message for them to warn him, Tsukumo asked.
Jiraiya nodded and immediately tried summoning Fukasaku and Shima.
However, he felt the seal lock, someone had already summoned them.
Considering that,
it seems they are already summoned. I can't pull them, and they're blocking the summoning, Jiraiya said as the seal on the ground began to dissipate.
I'll try another one.
He quickly formed the seals again. In the next moment, Gamabunta appeared, looking around with a bit of confusion.
He was still injured from the fight against Shikaku.
Jiraiya, he said upon seeing the sage.
Gamabunta, you look terrible. Just came out of a fight, huh? Tell me, did Minato summon you to Uzushioga?
Jiraiya asked.
Gamabunta nodded.
Yes. He summoned me, and I had to fight a damned one-tail. Then he summoned his dragon and started pulling the island, shortly before I was dismissed. I'll get information from Fukasaku and Shima later, when they're available, but for now, I'd like you to tell me exactly what happened here. Tell me every detail, Jiraiya requested, while Gamabunta nodded and began recounting everything from the moment he had been summoned.
Right in the middle of the battle already underway.
As the thousands of Konoha ninjas faced a completely empty stretch of sea filled with dead bodies, a few survivors were still agonizing. When asked what had happened, the only thing they managed to say, with failing voices, was, "Monsters, fear," before dying. At the same time, in the land of waterfalls, Uchiha Madara was sitting in his underground base, while White Zetsu appeared slightly nervous, looking at Madara, and Black Zetsu remained standing nearby.
Madara was silent, but his aura made his growing fury clear. White Zetsu could feel the heavy atmosphere emanating from his body, something between rage and disbelief. "Tell me, what is the latest news?" Madara asked in a surprisingly calm tone.
He expected the Uzumaki clan to fall, to be just another pebble in the way of his infinite Tsukuyomi plan. But as he listened to the reports from the start of the battle, he saw that things had not gone even remotely as he had wished. On the contrary, ninjas far too powerful for this era had emerged. The boy, the one who could fight Biju, alter the trajectory of a Baijidama, battle Kage on equal footing without tricks and kill them. The one who played at throwing tailed beasts off the battlefield with a strange body. Zetsu reported having seen him take damage, but simply regenerate, with his body turning to gold. There was no blood, nothing.
It was as if his body were no longer tangible. Not to mention the absurd speed and devastating attacks. Zetsu said he could not feel any chakra from him at all. Madara was certainly surprised that Konoha had obtained a perfect Jinchuriki after Mito's death, that someone from his clan had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. He believed it was only the first one. However, among all of them, Minato was the most irritating, with extremely versatile abilities. If one did not take him seriously, the only thing to expect was death. Madara believed that even he himself would need to be calm and cautious before the terrifying power the boy displayed, and he doubted Minato had shown everything. TSK. This makes me. He could not help but feel excitement. Could this boy have enough power to fight him and force him to use his full strength? Madara longed to battle someone powerful, the way he once fought Hashirama. Two women. One a perfect Jinchuriki, one a Mangekyo user, and everything indicates they are lovers of that man. This Minato Namikaze. It seems an interesting individual was born in this era. Madara commented, and even with his plan failing, he could not deny how surprised he was in the end. Chapter 335 Unwanted Attention. Third-person POV. Below the ground somewhere, 42. Zetsu White did not fail to give every detail to Madara, who listened attentively to what they had gathered amid all that chaos. Even Madara took some zetsus and put them under a genjutsu to observe their memories with a special Sharingan that could enter minds, studying the battlefield and how the Uzumaki had dealt with the threat, their movements, and their traps at the beginning, the attacks of Minato Namikaze using the teleportation jutsu, the second Hokage, and the other battles that followed with him controlling the necessary battlefields. With him fighting directly on several fronts, facing all the Kage present on the battlefield in the water, on land, and even in the air. Madara could not help being surprised both by Minato's powers and by the abilities of the perfect Jinchuriki, the Senju girl who could use Sage Mode, and the Hyuga commanding Uzumaki soldiers using bows with wind element, and lastly, the Uchiha using her own Susanoo in its initial stages. All of this seemed to intrigue Madara more and more. Konoha should be weakening, but they're simply evolving, he murmured thoughtfully. His prediction was that Konoha would grow weaker and weaker, that its talents should corrupt and disappear from time to time. If some exceptional ninja emerged, he would not be surprised, but that many of them at once, all disconnected as he had witnessed. Madara had much to think about, and it certainly worried him. Despite the hesitation, the curiosity about someone interesting appearing mixed with the anger of his failed plans. He had to admit, all of that was a lot, but he couldn't say it was uninteresting. Minato Namikaze was someone he had not paid much attention to in the beginning, despite being surprised by some of his achievements in the Second War. Even he had gotten close to Nagato, according to Zetsu, but did no harm and did not notice his eye. He simply helped him. He just didn't know if the boy had helped for some specific purpose knowing about his eyes, or if he normally did that with war orphans. But that didn't matter much to Madara after the boy never approached Nagato again, which made him believe it was just coincidence. However, the boy had certainly already proven to be a threat, but Madara still wanted to see if the village itself would try to destroy him. This turned out to be true, only they didn't succeed in the end. And that was when his plans began to fall apart. Konoha split after that. Madara sent the zetsus to the village to investigate, and all were captured by none other than Minato Namikaze himself. How he knew how to find the zetsus was a mystery, which already intrigued Madara at the time, since no one in the ninja world had managed to discover the creators who could steal or camouflage chakra with nature while traveling underground at high speed. However, Minato Namikaze proved capable of hunting each of them down, and the zetsus were all captured in Konoha that same night, with none returning. It was only later, when the other zetsus went to investigate what had happened after Minato had already left the village, that Madara discovered the truth. The village had entered a plebiscite a few days earlier and lost the opportunity to help the Uzumaki. The clan would still be condemned. Even so, the one who had been in the middle of all the confusion took all his fiancées and became, together with them, a group of rogue ninjas, going to the Uzumaki clan and giving them support, even with such an insignificant number. Madara had to admit the courage the boy had. Few would do the same, abandoning the safety of their lives in a powerful ninja village, leaving behind their homes and all their belongings to follow what they believed in. This awakened a certain respect in Madara.
There were few who were willing to lose everything to fight for what they believed in. This made Madara remember himself. After all, he abandoned the village, abandoned the clan precisely because he did not believe in their path. Madara believed only in his own. And he pursued it outside the village, even if afterward he had to threaten Konoha with Kurama, believing that the village system was worse than the clan system in the warring states, and his battle with Hashirama took place in the Valley of the End, which resulted in his defeat, but that did not stop Madara, on the contrary. He deceived the entire world. Now, after hearing all of that, and after Zetsu gathered more information about Minato after he escaped the village, Madara discovered a little of how those girls had gained such power. Connecting them with the information he had received, all of them trained with Minato Namikaze in some way, and it seemed he had given hints on how to increase each of their powers. Somehow, he managed to help each of those women evolve with mastery, seeming to know each of their strengths and even their weaknesses. And now, proving his own power to the entire world, Minato showed his versatile way of using Tobirama's jutsu in a lethal manner, teleporting across the battlefield. Not even the second Hokage had reached such a level of mastery, not to the point of grabbing multiple Baijidama being launched at the Uzumaki and throwing them back at their own enemies, who suffered countless losses. Minato surpassed Tobirama in Madara's eyes, without a doubt. His abilities with Senjutsu, Kenjutsu, Ninjutsu, Fuinjutsu, and Taijutsu also intrigued Madara. He immediately found a way to link all these combinations into a highly versatile form of combat. Recognizing the flexible fighting styles the boy could have, Minato could fly through the sky, kick the air, and trade taijutsu blows with Inoki, not to mention that Zetsu had seen the old Tsuchikage get beaten. He had also seen memories of Minato trading blows with the Reikage in his most brutal form. However, he did not use anything known, but instead a type of black armor that covered his hands, using it together with so many other teleportation and light-based abilities. The boy had beaten the Reikage and even killed him with a technique very similar to the style of Tsukumo Hataki from the Leaf Village, which made Madara suspect that the boy had been his apprentice at some point, but the boy had also added that black layer to the sword, further enhancing the cut, doing something not even Tsukumo could do. Madara studied Zetsu's records when he saw that black thing. Extremely attentive, he noticed that there was no chakra flow coming from that black form. It was as if it were not made of chakra at all, perfect to the point of having no fluctuation. He could only confirm something by seeing it with his own Sharingan. The boy also had an abnormal perception, as if he almost knew where they were going to attack. In the end, Uzushiogakure was still standing, and all four nations that had tried to destroy them had suffered irreparable losses. The Leaf Village was now even further ahead in power than everyone else. All of this was also thanks to the boy, whose abilities seemed to go beyond what had already been mentioned, the usefulness of his skills and the number of other jutsu he possessed, many S-rank jutsu, field control jutsu, explosive and destructive jutsu, some he managed to combine with other elements, as he had done with the toads, leaving a mark on the ninja world that day. His chakra control and his sage mode, the amount of chakra he must have used in this war, was equivalent to that of a tailed beast, without a doubt. And he managed to handle all of that by entering and leaving Sage Mode. His leadership abilities also stood out, his way of thinking and organizing his allies, and of preparing traps for the enemies as he had done. Madara could not help but turn his thoughts directly to Minato now. He was a great threat to his plans and he could no longer ignore his existence. His senses told him that he could be even more dangerous than they said. He needed to lure him, for Madara himself planned to deal with him personally. But he needed to lure him now that Uzushiogakure was in the sky, out of sight even of the Zetsus. You should have placed some Zetsus inside the island, Madara complained, while the White Being opened a smile. Sorry, Madara-sama, but we didn't know the Uzumaki had a way to make their island fly. We didn't place any because we knew we would be detected, said White Zetsu. Madara stayed silent for a moment and nodded. I suppose you're right, Madara replied in the end, with a sigh. Even if he had placed the Zetsus there, the boy could very well do what he did with Konoha, find them underground and kill them. We'll have to keep an eye on where the island is going. Keep several Zetsus watching the middle of the sea in all regions, even the other continent to the east, looking for any sign of the island in the sky. It can't stay up there forever, can it? Madara said before sighing again. You said he made it fly with the help of a dragon, correct? A hint of envy slipped through Madara's words. He had searched for a dragon his entire life, as a summoning. Nothing was more desirable to him than a dragon for his arsenal, worthy of being Uchiha Madara's summon. However, he never found their land. It was easier to find the nine-tailed fox than a real dragon, and now, that boy had gotten one too. Well, that didn't matter. He still had to continue his plans, while already thinking of a way to eliminate Minato once and for all, even if he had to fight for the last time while he was still alive. Now that his possible successor was getting stronger and stronger, training somewhere in that cave with even more powerful eyes than before, Madara would get rid of Minato and let other things unfold. While Madara continued struggling over what to do, in Uzushiogakure, now in the middle of the starry sky, closer than it had ever been. A great festival was being held since nightfall, with people gathered, all celebrating the great victory of the Uzumaki clan against the four nations that had tried to destroy them. The entire village was celebrating, to the point of leaving the mourning for the dead for the next day. First they would celebrate the victory, with the clan leader himself paying homage to those who fell in the battle, in the center of the square, while the place was overflowing with red hair talking, laughing, and singing joyfully. Some families did not attend, obviously due to mourning. They had lost their loved ones and had no desire to celebrate. So they stayed in their homes. Even so, those who celebrated filled the streets. The Uzumaki danced with one another, families laughed and ate. A platform had been set up in the middle of the square, while the main table was shared with the leaders and elders. And the central place was not being occupied by Masaki, but by Minato and his three girls on his right side, while the clan leader was on his left. This was after Masaki himself insisted that he join them and take the main seat. After all, everyone knew that the ones who had truly saved the clan were the outsiders from the village. Minato was there enjoying the atmosphere with his fiancées, while talking with Masaki and exchanging a few words with his women, while they gossiped with other people. Hey, can you see? On the other side of the table, the clan leader's granddaughter has been staring at Minato the entire night. She's been interested in him ever since she saw him. Suna murmured, while Kushina felt the same. Exactly. She hasn't stopped interrupting her grandfather's conversation with Minato, just to get his attention. Kushina said irritably. There's no way Minato is going to get married by choosing more wives from the Uzumaki clan, right? Hanabi murmured, casting a look at Minato, who began sneezing in the middle of the conversation, asking if someone was speaking badly of him. Well, why are you so worried about the little girl at the table? Look at the festival. It was Makoto who pointed forward. The girls looked, and there were several eyes turned toward the main table, mostly female. Single women, widows at this moment, or even some already committed had a sparkle in their eyes, staring at the center of the table. We should be worried about those looks over there, not the specific girl, Makoto said with a serious, almost arrogant tone. And no, this can't be true, can it? Are you saying they're looking that way? Kushina couldn't even finish. They certainly remind me of Kushina. Suna commented, after all the redhead was in love with Minato and could now see many redheads with a similar gleam in their eyes. She's saying all those Uzumakis want our husband. Kushina complained. You're exaggerating. I don't think that's possible, Hanabi murmured, unsure. You think that's exaggeration? You should have seen it. I healed a woman today and her sister went to thank Minato by trying to come up with an excuse to marry him. She didn't even thank me, Databane. She just grabbed Minato as if he were the one who healed her sister, and wanted him to make her his wife. Kushina exclaimed angrily, while all the girls stared in shock. I can be sure of one thing, Kushina continued, hitting the table. Uzumaki girls like boys with blonde hair, blue eyes, who are popular, strong, and confident. Who save damsels in distress and are war heroes. Kushina declared, crossing her arms. Hey, there aren't many people like that in the world. You're being very specific, Hanabi said with a sigh. After all, if that were true, then only one person in the world fit that description. Pay attention, all of you. Suna called out to them. I don't know what's going to happen from now on, but we need to worry. Minato said we would marry him after the war, right?
So we have to act as fast as possible and keep all those women in line. We can't let them get near Minato or let him be seduced. Understood? Suna said, and the other 3 girls nodded quickly. None of them would give up Minato. And without realizing it, this became a way for all of them to strengthen their bond even more, leaving all rivalry aside to keep their territory and their man only for the 4 of them, sharing with no one else. Minato was certainly hearing their debate with observation haki, while feeling a headache starting to form in the next few days. Both because of his future wives and because of the many looks he was receiving, trying to ignore everyone who stared at him eagerly. Why is this becoming a problem now? Just ignore me. I want to study the Uzumaki clan's jutsu in the next few days, not worry about suitors or marriage, he couldn't help lamenting. He would rather have Madara's attention on him at this moment than this. Chapter 336 World Reaction. Third Person POV. Elemental Nations, 42. Days passed while the entire ninja world was in chaos at that moment. News and rumors spread along with demands, apologies, and even requests for refunds for what had happened in every direction. After Uzumaki had completely vanished from the eyes of the world, no one found any trace of the Uzumaki island anymore. The news about the dead Kage, the missing bijou, and the thousands of massacred shinobi spread across all the lands, while everyone was entirely shocked by the outcome of the battle around Uzumaki. Countries close to the coast, such as the land of ramen, the land of waves, and the land of hot water, spread rumors coming from their ports, while fishermen and sailors could see the explosions from afar out at sea, echoes of a battle that shook the entire world. Not even the entire Second Great Ninja War had demanded such an amount of chakra as what happened in this event, used so greatly by both sides, given that the bijou had never launched as many attacks as they did in the land of whirlpools. The name Minato Namikaze spread across the entire world like uncontrollable flames. If the world already called Minato the Yellow Flash at the end of the Second War, something he had anticipated long before the original timeline due to the fight he had against the Raikage at the northern border at that time, now he had reached a new level in this battle. The living ninja who could kill Kage. How many people in the world could claim the same thing? All those who had ever assassinated Kage were dead, while there were Kage who had indeed been murdered and others who had died of old age or illness. Besides that, he was the ninja who took down most of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, who fought against Bijou, who could stop even Bijudama and hold them in the palms of his hands, who could fight against the Kazekage with his bare fists, who had an alliance with the Toad clan and could use their sage mode, who could fly in the sky and had a unique Kekkei Genkai in the ninja world, an unprecedented one that had never appeared before, a user of the light element. Even so, Minato Namikaze quickly exploded in notoriety, associated with the assassination of a Kazekage, a Mizukage, and a Raikage. Not to mention that he brought Konoha's own Hokage to his knees and defeated Oanoki, throwing him far from the battlefield, also forcing the 4th Kazekage to his knees and making him flee with his tail between his legs. A ninja who became a Konoha deserter to fight a war alone and change it completely. From the high-ranking shinobi of the world to ordinary citizens, everyone heard about Minato, while merchants brought news and rumors heard in the villages and on the road. This event was simply too big, and the entire world could not ignore it. There was a ninja powerful enough to make entire nations tremble in fear all by himself. And it wasn't just him. The names of the 4 girls who had also left Konoha at Minato's side began circulating right after his. The fact that there was a Kyuubi Jinchuriki with perfect control would already shock the entire world on its own. But this time, she was associated as Minato Namikaze's companion. And just like her, Makoto Uchiha, the user who managed to fight against the Raikage and many shinobi from the Hidden Cloud village using her powerful eye, the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan unleashed a power the world had long forgotten. It didn't take long for people to associate that with Uchiha Madara, since the older generations, those who witnessed the Warring States era and were still alive, claimed they had seen a similar power coming from the legendary Uchiha. Research on the Uchiha ocular power, something even the clan itself had forgotten, began spreading through all the elemental nations. Makoto ended up being feared just as much as the perfect Jinchuriki. A new Madara Uchiha was rising in the world, as many said. And it wasn't just the 2 of them. Suna Senju was a more well-known name than before.
daughter of the famous Tsunade Senju. While her mother was known as the most capable medical kunoichi in the world, her daughter surpassed her in terms of combat, at least, though her medical ability was not far behind her mother's. The entire world now knew the one who mastered the sage mode of Shikatsu Forest, something even her mother had not achieved, and who fought equally against Bijou with overwhelming strength. According to rumors, there was no punch more powerful anywhere in the world than the one that girl wielded.
Hanabi Hyuga also became known.
Perhaps not as powerful as the perfect Jinchuriki or as Makoto, who many claimed had powers comparable to Uchiha Madara. Even so, Hanabi Hyuga was beginning to be recognized for her powerful wind-style combat, something outside the usual patterns of the Hyuga clan. She used wind release and her Byakugan to fire arrows with high precision and destructive force strong enough to be ranked as an A-level jutsu, killing most shinobi who entered her range. Placing her as someone that, if you were within her line of sight, you could only expect death, no matter if you were hidden among trees or stones. The names of these four girls had not been spoken much after the World War, some of them even unknown to the ninja world outside Konoha, but now no one could deny it. Even people who paid little attention to the Uzumaki themselves, who were also in battle, commented on the 5 individuals who had left the Leaf Village to fight against Kage, Bijou, and ninja powerhouses. Each of the clans associated with each of the girls gained immediate prestige in Konoha and in the world. All were considered producers of geniuses, even if unintentionally, and ended up receiving a certain reputation after this event. The Uzumaki clan, which had produced the perfect Jinchuriki within Konoha, surpassing even the wife of the first Hokage, something outsiders claimed, while Saratobi had no idea what to think about it, still wondered how Kushina had managed to control Kurama under his eyes and surveillance, even with him and Danzo always watching her closely. After all, Minato was already classified as a dangerous ninja for their government in Konoha, and this association with Kushina made them cautious. However, that didn't change the fact that she had deceived them all anyway, or rather, Minato had done something that fooled everyone right under their noses, and when they realized it, they had already lost. The Uchiha clan had also regained great respect in the world, as once again it had produced a kunoichi powerful enough to fight against a Kage alone, and not just any Kage, but one of the most feared, the Reikage. While the clan itself seemed lost about how things were unfolding, some elders bitterly regretted having expelled Makoto from the clan. Besides the trouble they caused in that incident, where Minato interfered, killed an elder, and practically forced the entire clan to its knees. They also lost someone who would have brought the clan back to its peak. Someone who would make the Uchiha even more feared than ever. Although they were gaining fame indirectly through Makoto, it wasn't the same with her no longer being associated with the clan, since rumors circulated that she was no longer a clan member, having been expelled, as she was going to marry Minato Namikaze, something the clan did not accept back then, and now it was a true slap in their faces. They could very well have made Makoto the future clan matriarch in place of her father, which would have been quite fitting, allowing her to marry someone outside the clan while still ensuring her children would be the next leaders. Even if she chose to be a housewife and take care of her children, the Uchiha would still have a matriarch, which would bring numerous advantages, since even if she didn't handle clan matters, the elders could do all the work for her while she merely remained leader in name, granting the clan reputation for it. Even if some other elders argued that she should marry another pure Uchiha, claiming her association with Minato would not produce capable heirs because the blood wouldn't be pure. Still, the regret of most of the clan was visible. Mazu Uchiha looked at his elders arguing inside. They had finally secured a seat in the village's decision-making. He was now part of the council, as he should be. The Nara clan, the Senju clan, and the Hatake clan, with the latter temporarily holding the village's leadership. Mazu was proud that the Uchiha clan finally had its place, but it still never seemed to satisfy the elders, and they always wanted more. And now they were arguing about another problem, his daughter. Those fools hadn't thought twice before expelling her from the clan, and now they cried because she had developed the Mangekyo Sharingan and was no longer part of the clan. Mazu couldn't help thinking about that as he watched them argue. His gaze shifted to Fugaku Uchiha, who had remained silent the entire time. He had given up on his own daughter long ago, knowing that Makoto was beyond their control. He had married another woman, and his wife was pregnant. Fugaku would be a good leader, Mazu believed, but if he had the chance, he wouldn't think twice. He would place his daughter as the clan's matriarch, married to Minato or not.
but that was not the case. He knew he couldn't hope for it. Fugaku would soon be the next clan leader. He felt his life wouldn't last much longer and only wished to at least see his grandson, who would be born in a few months. He had no doubt the child would be an extraordinary shinobi, both from the mother's side and the father's. And it didn't matter if he wouldn't be 100% Uchiha, he would be the son of the most feared man in the ninja world at the moment. The same man who already had a reputation for facing Hanzo and Kage in the Second Great Ninja War now held the reputation of killing 3 Kage in less than 2 weeks. In the Senju clan, now composed of only 2 people, they watched the news about Tsuna with wide smiles on their faces. They hadn't arrived in time for the battle, which earned them some regret since Konoha had delayed so much. But soon they began receiving battle reports from the surviving shinobi themselves. Seeing that the elemental nations tried to hide what had happened was impossible when there were thousands of witnesses and when only 1/6 or 1/5 of the shinobi had returned. Some without their kage, others without their bijou, entire nations had been weakened. The Senju clan now consisted only of Tsunade, her brother, his future wife, and little Yamato, who was still being trained by Tsunade after being adopted. Tsuna did well, Tsunade said, satisfied, reading the scrolls about her daughter's performance in battle. Seeing her daughter punch Bijou hard enough to send them flying was something Tsunade couldn't keep herself from smiling about. The Senju clan was being feared by the world once again. Besides their medical abilities in the Second World War, the strength Tsuna displayed had brought her to a level where the Senju clan had produced someone of Kage level. "That's my niece." Nawaki laughed beside her, also pleased as he read. "See? Our clan isn't completely lost, so you, my dear brother, will have the role of restoring it. After all, my daughter won't take the Senju surname like my husband did, and I need many capable nephews." Tsunade crossed her arms and spoke directly to her brother, who immediately shrank. There was only one way to restore the clan: producing children. "Now hurry up and marry my lovely sister-in-law and produce many Senju," Tsunade declared, while Nawaki grew a bit embarrassed by that. The Hyuga didn't know whether the clan's growing fame through Hanabi was a good thing or a bad thing. After all, at first the ninja world began praising her for her different way of using the Byakugan and her long-range combat style, something the clan did not practice. They were traditional in gentle fist combat and close-quarters fighting. Using a bow and arrow was something that had displeased them from the very moment they heard about Hanabi using such a style with her Byakugan. And not only that. There was also the fact that Hanabi was a kunoichi born into the secondary branch and had still managed to remove the caged bird seal, something that should not have been possible. But she managed it with help from her companions. This motivated the secondary branch greatly. And now, with her growing fame, perhaps the Hyuga clan was on the verge of a revolt of the secondary family against the main family. This was horrible for the elders, even though, in the ninja world, they were gaining reputation through a rebellious kunoichi. Konoha itself was in total chaos. The 5 shinobi who had left the village had become legends, bringing regret and frustration to Konoha's residents, who, in the ninja world, had become an indirect joke that 5 people had gone to war on their own, abandoning their own village. Meanwhile, the entirety of Konoha had bowed like cowards for not protecting its own allies. There were benefits, such as the immense rise of the 3 great clans within Konoha, but the village itself had become a joke, called cowards by most shinobi in the world. Chapter 337, The Clan's Discarded Scrolls. Third-person POV. Yuzushio-Vicure, the Floating Island, 42. These are all the seals that were forbidden by the clan. They were never taught or even placed among the treasure, because they are flawed with endless theories. Minato heard Masaki beside him and looked at the amount of scrolls of all sizes piled up in front of him as if he were seeing an invaluable treasure. Even though this place was considered the clan's discard. Now, holding such a cherished position in the Uzumaki clan as their savior, just as the Uzumakis treated him, Minato had spent the last days having full access to the entire clan, reaching information that not even Mito had, since, even being a princess of the clan, only the patriarch possessed access to certain knowledge within the clan, as he was responsible for protecting all those secrets. Wow! He couldn't help but whistle in amazement, while he, along with the patriarch beside him, looked at that large place with those interesting scrolls. Minato opened his observation haki and could even read what was written with his consciousness inside those scrolls. There were scrolls that, somehow, tried to bring the dead back or communicate with the impure world, scrolls that attempted to deceive the Shinigami in order to perform seals without sacrificing oneself. And also those that sought souls sealed within them, something Minato believed that, later, Orochimaru had managed to get his hands on, since he performed similar feats almost 20 years after this period, using a special mask. This place is fantastic, can I stay here for a while? I'd like to study them patiently, Minato said, knowing he would need to spend many hours there. Upon hearing him, the patriarch replied, "All right, stay as long as you need. Just don't forget. If you're going to take anything from here outside, inform me. You have the clan's full loyalty and access, but we cannot let these scrolls fall into the hands of anyone else besides the two of us here," he warned, pausing. "If we didn't have so much trust in you before the battle, we probably would have burned all these scrolls before our enemy arrived. That would have even been the sensible decision. If the attack had come suddenly without us knowing, the first thing we would do would be to destroy all these scrolls before the attack. Obviously, that didn't happen, and now all the scrolls were intact." In the last days, Minato had read through the clan's official scrolls, types of Fuinjutsu to which not even Mito had access. These, however, were basically the clan's discard, with all kinds of seals with crazy ideas that even tried to change reality. Combinations of seals that had not been completed, theories that never found a solution or became useless. Even seals that resulted in the death of their creators. Only the patriarch could handle them, as they were extremely dangerous. Minato thanked him and Masaki ended up leaving the place. Minato wasted no time as he crossed his fingers and created multiple shadow clones. In just a few moments, at least 40 clones began grabbing all the papers and studying them around the entire room. All to absorb every scroll in the next few hours. There were as many jutsus made with seals as he had predicted, new combinations and utilities that Minato delighted in as he saw such a sea of knowledge. He couldn't have asked for anything better. Golden power he already had already made the entire world tremble before his name, before his fame. And even though he had not yet reached his peak in strength, there was something Minato valued more than any power or wealth: knowledge. Acquiring new solutions for the future would be extremely beneficial, and Minato saw several interesting things among those scrolls. There were some older ones, which even mentioned Hagoromo and his two sons, citing them throughout 1,000 years ago. But these scrolls had been discarded there along with the others, probably because they considered the idea of the Rikuta to be merely a legend over the centuries, with Black Zetsu making sure to erase any mention of the past. And this surprised him, that Black Zetsu had not managed to gain knowledge of these scrolls, because he certainly would have tried to destroy them, but the Uzumaki protected this room with such zeal that it was impossible for something like even Black Zetsu to access it. In any case, Minato became interested. There were texts that even spoke about the origin of chakra, the way people should understand it, and how the sage of the paths wished. Minato was even more interested when he discovered mentions of the chakras of Indra and Azura, the grandchildren of Kagaya Otsutsuki. He was disappointed not to find anything about the alien clan nor mentions of Otsutsuki Kagaya as the princess of the moon or about her partner, whom she lured into this world. All of this seemed like a great mystery to Minato. Black Zetsu knew of the existence of his mother, obviously, but he likely didn't even know about the other Otsutsuki who was still alive in this world, surviving even after Kagaya's betrayal, much less about the future, when others would come to this world. Minato couldn't deny that he was worried about the future of this planet that had now become his home. It didn't matter that he was a rogue ninja. He was on an island in the sky, no one in the ninja world could reach him, both his allies and his family were safe, but the world? It was seriously doomed in the future, and he needed to worry about that because there was nowhere to run. It was win or die. He needed, somehow, to strengthen the world for the approaching catastrophe. He needed to place powerful people on the front lines, preserve the strongest clans and make them even stronger. And not only that. He might even need to summon, with Edo Tensei, an army of all the most powerful shinobi in history, as Kabuto did, if he wanted the world to survive. After all, even those in the impure world should be affected by the chakra absorption of the divine tree raised on the planet, since spirits are also made entirely of chakra. Minato certainly had bold ideas to strengthen the world, ideas that perhaps bordered on madness. Maybe even contributing with Madara, gathering the bijou and trying to talk to Kagaya. She wanted to turn the world into white Zetsu, and that would be foolish. White Zetsu weren't even useful as cannon fodder in the ninja war, let alone fighting against gods. It was better for the world to follow its natural course and for more people to become powerful. He had enough time until his grandson was born and grew into adolescence. Until he reached Boruto's age, when all the events involving the Otsutsuki clan would begin. It was a shame that the scrolls mentioned nothing about Hagoromo Otsutsuki's brother, Hamura Otsutsuki. Black Setsu had done a good job with that. He simply erased the entire existence of his mother, her two sons, as well as what he did with Hagoromo's sons. No one even knew Hagoromo Otsutsuki had a brother. A brother who possessed his mother's eyes, the Byakugan, and who later established a clan on the moon. Somehow Minato didn't understand how some of his descendants created the Hyuga clan and settled on the planet, while the other side remained on the moon. This made Minato think of the Tenseigan, the evolutionary stage of the Byakugan, something comparable to the power of a supreme dojutsu like the Rinnegan. His thoughts immediately went to Hanabi. As powerful as she was by normal standards, Minato could feel her emotions, and he was a bit worried about her. She was in an internal conflict. Minato had been able to feel it for some time, even before the battle, that she sensed she was being left behind. He wanted to help her somehow, but he knew there were limits. Not everyone could have a bijou inside their body with monstrous power capable of changing an entire war, nor eyes that were much easier to evolve. After all, aside from what would happen years later, there had never truly been an evolution of the Byakugan, and the Hyuga clan didn't even imagine that their eyes were just one stage, and that they could reach a god level if they evolved. Even Suna possessed monstrous strength with Sage Mode, and she felt overshadowed compared to Makoto and Kushina. And Hanabi was even weaker than Suna. Minato somehow needed to help his girl. She had no talent for Fuinjutsu like Suna and Kushina did. Her alternatives were to try to obtain a Sage Mode or pursue something related to the Tenseigan. But Minato was at a point where he knew nothing about that dojutsu. Maybe, if he visited the moon, he could find some clue himself. He could travel at the speed of light in a straight line, he would reach the moon in a few seconds, and nothing in the world prevented light from entering or leaving the planet. Maybe it was possible, he had never tried something like that. I'll think about that later. Minato began watching each clone finish reading a scroll and vanish, passing the information to him immediately. He received a large volume of data all at once, blinking several times, mentally tired. He soon stood up and stretched his arms. He was a bit mentally exhausted and wanted to reread the scrolls to memorize the simpler ones, but he wasn't in any condition to do so at the moment. He left the area, opening the door to the room. On the other side, there were two ninjas waiting for him, ready to close the barrier that protected that room. The security of that place was something that might have been worth more than the clan's own survival. In any case, Minato greeted the two ninjas and began to leave, climbing a few stairs before entering the bunkers where the Uzumaki had stayed during the war. He climbed a few more flights and finally reached the outside. The sun was already rising, and he knew his girls were waiting for him at home, so he decided to head there. The people of the clan greeted him with smiles and cheerful waves. Minato returned the gestures as he continued toward the house where they had been staying since the beginning. Hanabi's grandfather had now gotten a separate house and no longer needed to stay with Kushina's mother, but Hanabi visited him every day, while Kushina did the same with her mother. As for Minato, Hanabi, Suna, Makoto, and Kushina, they all lived together in the same house. It was a somewhat tense dynamic at times, dealing with all those personalities, but he liked it. He didn't think life was that bad, he just needed to add some children. Somehow, those girls had learned to live with one another, and now, they were more united than ever, if Minato could say so. But it wasn't all that strange, considering what had been happening in the Uzumaki clan regarding him. They had bonded by finding a common enemy, and Minato couldn't help but feel a shiver when small feminine voices began to echo somewhere at that very moment. His smile died immediately when he saw a group of girls with signs walking around the clan, certainly looking for him. Minato froze on the spot, hoping they wouldn't see him.
If he simply vanished now, they would notice, and he hoped they would pass by without spotting him. But while they walked in another direction, one of them looked to the side and froze upon seeing him.
"He's over there," one shouted.
10 red heads turned at the same time. His love life had become a bit exhausting. Single girls had begun appearing from all sides looking for him and the clan all day long, and it became even worse when the patriarch suddenly announced that Minato had permission to marry an Uzumaki. Even though he was clearly referring to Kushina, there was something hidden behind it. Minato knew the old man had his eye on his genetics. It was a move to further strengthen the clan, creating children of the man capable of bringing Konoha and all the other nations to their knees on his own. Minato mentally cursed the ambitious elder for wanting his seed as he saw the other girls beginning to run toward him with screams, signs, and declarations. He only sighed, regretting having decided to stroll through the village. He was already almost used to this kind of situation in recent days, so he simply disappeared and went home, teleporting straight there. The residence had its own barrier, created by Kushina and Suna, preventing the entry of single women from the clan who were searching for Minato, the enemy against whom Minato's 4 brides had united to fight, doing a better job than 4 entire nations.
Chapter 338. An Intimate Moment with Suna, R18. Part 1. Third-person POV.
Yuzushiovicure, the floating island, 42. Have you arrived? A calm voice came from the kitchen while vegetables were being chopped.
Minato couldn't help but smile as he approached Makoto, who was sitting at the table working.
She glanced at him sideways, but Minato didn't mind. In front of that woman, he had no problem at all closing the distance. Besides, they had already shared intimate moments. It was no wonder she was expecting his child after living together for months in Minato's old apartment with only one bed. His arms circled her small belly as he leaned in to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. Makoto flinched slightly, tilting her neck to the side and sniffing against his chest, before opening a smile and lifting her face in expectation, looking directly at him.
Minato didn't think twice before kissing her, their lips pressing together.
As he expected, she responded, and he pulled back only a little before bringing his lips to hers again, giving small kisses that made her smile happily.
"How are you?" he asked as he pulled away.
She returned her attention to the vegetables, continuing to cut them calmly, since that night she had taken on the responsibility of dinner. "I spent the day in here, doing some things around the house, but nothing much. I only read a few scrolls my father left me when we left Konoha. I wanted to learn more about illusions, since it's not really my strongest point," she said.
"I understand.
And being you, with that powerful eye of yours, you'll go far easily," Minato declared as if it were something natural.
Makoto felt her chest warm with the compliment.
He moved away shortly after and headed toward the bedroom. "Suna seems very interested in Fuinjutsu from what I can see," he commented as he opened the sliding door. Inside, he found the blonde lying on a futon and over the scroll, her back to the mat as she kicked her legs. She wore simple pajamas, and Minato could see her curves very well, including the beautiful but toned by training, which he instinctively ended up staring at, some desire stirring within him. "Are you going to keep staring at my butt, Minato?" Suna's voice was heard, without her taking her eyes off the scroll beneath her chin.
"Right after standing there kissing Makoto, you pervert," she teased.
"Hey, what's with all this bad mood?" Minato muttered, approaching her and sitting beside her. The sun was already setting, and Kushina and Hanabi still hadn't returned. They were probably at a relative's house and would arrive soon.
He looked at the scroll Suna was reading, about Uzumaki medical ninjutsu.
Although her mother could naturally teach her, having learned from Mito, there was information there that even Mito didn't have, which had remained within the clan. It was natural for Suna to be interested, especially because she was also very talented in Fuinjutsu. Is she jealous? Minato thought, lightly touching her back with a gentle motion.
After spending days being chased by the clan's dozens of single women, why shouldn't he enjoy the company of those he truly loved?
They would be married soon, but that didn't lessen a certain desire he felt for them.
"What are you doing, Minato? You pervert," she cursed him again, making him raise an eyebrow. "You call me a pervert, now I'm really feeling hurt. I thought we were almost husband and wife."
"Shouldn't your body belong to me, just as mine would belong to you?" he said, while she seemed to struggle to keep a serious expression before returning to a reluctant pout.
And it was supposed to be like that. But I felt your chakra very clearly in the way you moved when you got to Makoto and kissed her.
Then you come here putting your hands on my body before staring at my butt trying to see what's under my pajamas. You're so shameless, Minato, she grumbled.
Well, I don't see any problem with that. After all, we'll be a family and kissing will be something perfectly normal on many occasions. Now that we have no more problems, being in the heavens and without enemies, we can enjoy each other's company while we train. Minato said.
After all, even though they had won that small war, there was still room to improve their strengths. Minato would train his advanced hakis, both the internal explosion/impact of armament haki and even future sight from observation haki, which would give him great battle power, even more so once he managed to master Conqueror's haki. And not just him, all the girls also had room to grow. After saying that, Suna made a decision and acted right then, while Minato was surprised when Makoto stood up and faced him, their eyes locked as her face was very close to his.
Then kiss me,
she simply said, almost as if it were a command, wanting the same affection Minato had given Makoto. Suna was frustrated that Minato had kissed Makoto the way a wife welcomes her husband home after work, and she felt jealous, but when Minato came to her, the first thing he did was stare at her butt. Without the tender welcome the Uchiha had received, she became frustrated. Minato smiled at her close to her face, now with much more tenderness, fully understanding her feelings. He raised his hand, gripping her face with one hand and her waist with the other, pulling her closer and giving her a better kiss than he had ever given her. Suna was surprised at first, but soon let herself be carried away, closing her eyes and enjoying how Minato was kissing her in that way. Feeling his tongue enter her mouth while she also placed her tongue in his, engaging in an equal battle. She soon moaned, and Minato didn't let her, his hand moving from her face to her waist as he pulled her closer. With no choice, Suna had to lift her leg, placing her knee on the other side of Minato's waist, almost sitting between his legs, but still keeping her knees in place.
However, this only intensified their kiss.
Minato ended up sliding his hand from her face down, both hands now reaching the tight backside of her pajamas.
Minato tightened his grip on her buttocks, causing her to moan.
Suna could feel her whole body starting to heat up, but she didn't stop Minato's hand from squeezing her like that. She felt hotter than ever, her body was reacting in favor of Minato.
To hell with marriage.
Minato thought as he saw where they were going with all this, he let his lust for her drive his actions and she didn't stop him.
Lemon scene happened. Minato was laughing at her pressure.
He didn't stop giving her a few last kisses, making her blush even more as she felt more of his touch after that crazy experience. She raised her head to look at him, horrified.
What was that?
She asked, even knowing what it meant. The experience was something completely different from the theory, and she stared at Minato, still between her legs, looking at her with a silly smile. You made me a happy man, Suna, he declared, with her still looking at him with a face full of pleasure and shame.
What do you mean by that? She murmured.
If your body was stimulated enough to release your fluids, it means it's an achievement for a man who can give you pleasure to the point of seeing you tremble. Seeing you orgasm means you like my touch, and I'm happy. It means we'll have a happy marriage and some children in the process, he said. She stared at him before lying down again, looking at the ceiling.
You know, we should have done this years ago, Suna simply said.
He couldn't deny that it was the best feeling in the world. What he felt was more than a man's touch. It was Minato's touch, the man he loved and trusted. She would surrender herself body and soul to him. The man who made her feel like a maiden discovering a completely different world. Silence hung between the two for a moment, before laughter began to erupt. No one knew who started it, but both seemed to enjoy giggling at the comment.
Yes, we should. Minato replied. I heard something from you.
To hell with marriage, I agree with you. She said, her mind still in ecstasy, but with a strange feeling now. It seemed as if all the weight of the war and battles had simply vanished, and she was just there, relaxed, unable to remember the last time she felt so light. So this is sex, the feeling Makoto said was magical, Suna murmured.
So that's what you and Makoto were doing? Suna asked curiously. That, among other things.
Minato replied, making Tsuna purse her lips at him.
Do you want to continue? He asked. Oral sex is one thing, but if you want to continue, there's no going back. We should do this as a married couple. It doesn't matter anymore.
But my mother said it hurts at first. Although she confessed it was easy, using her healing abilities, Tsuna commented, a little nervous, looking at Minato. She was embarrassed, but it was as if she was inviting him to continue. This girl can punch and kick Bijou and she's nervous about breaking her hymen, Minato thought, rolling his eyes. Minato stood up to her, facing her, and began to kiss her.
If it's okay, we can continue. I will be calm and gentle with you on your first time,
he said as she felt the tenderness and security of his words.
Then let me see you too, Minato. I'm the only one naked here.
She complained as she began to move her hands to Minato's clothes, taking them off, revealing the blond man's muscular chest. There was no fat, only the result of his physical training. Tsuna felt a great desire seeing him there. Then she saw him removing his underwear and saw his penis. It must have been about 20 centimeters, hard. She felt hypnotized by her future husband's member.
Let's move on to the next phase,
he said, while she nodded nervously.
Chapter 339. An Intimate Moment with Tsuna, R18. Part 2. Third-person POV.
Yuzushiovicure, the floating island, 42.
Can I continue? Minato asked with a touch of tenderness, while he was on top of Tsuna, who was naked as well.
Yes, she replied, still nervous. Her lower body was very sensitive at the moment, but her excitement screamed for her to have her future husband's member inside her.
Minato smiled with his lips closed as he touched her face, saying that everything was all right. Lemon scene happened. In another place. Arrived.
Kushina shouted excitedly, upon sensing the chakra of everyone else already in the house the clan had given them to live in.
Makoto opened a smile as she began to heat and fry their dinner for that night. Hello, Kushina,
she said with a small smile, although it seemed strangely forced. Hanabi, who had arrived a few minutes earlier, looked at her awkwardly.
What's with you all?
She asked curiously, feeling the strange atmosphere in the house. In any case, she approached them cheerfully. You know, I had to strengthen the barrier even more before entering here. There are 5 women outside with signs, wanting to talk to Minato, she said with great dissatisfaction.
I saw them too,
Hanabi commented, although her tone sounded restrained.
So, why do they keep acting like that?
I never thought the women of my clan were so shameless. My mother said I shouldn't worry, that Minato wouldn't choose anyone else, saying that 4 is already a dangerous number of wives to have. She says Minato might go insane if he had more wives.
She laughed. I think your mother is completely right,
Makoto said, seeming to have some hidden meaning behind her words as her lips curved into a sly smile. She also says the women of the clan don't see Minato only as a hero who saved everyone or a powerful man who can kill even the strongest people in the world with ease, but my mother told me that all the women in the clan look at us and see something unusual. We are all powerful. They started believing Minato gave us power somehow. Some women asked me how I became strong, and I initially answered that my husband helped me.
I was being innocent. I didn't know they would get excited, wanting to steal another woman's husband, Databane. Kushina soon began entering her bloody tomato mode. Husband, huh? Hanabi commented as Kushina lifted her nose.
He will be soon, so there's no reason not to say he is already our husband. At least it puts some of those shameless women in their place, she said with conviction.
Ah!
A loud sound came from the bedroom, catching Kushina's attention immediately, making her turn her eyes to the room upstairs.
That? Tsuna?
She's with Minato in the bedroom,
Kushina murmured. Leave them there, Makoto said in a calm tone, already knowing what was going on. Hanabi knew too, but unlike Makoto's calmness, she turned red. Don't tell me,
Kushina murmured, stunned as she realized what was happening.
Tsuna and Minato are having sex. As far as I know, it's the first time.
Minato went to see her. I don't know how they ended up in that state having sex with each other.
Makoto said as she gave attention to the food she was preparing.
Kushina began to understand what was happening, and she turned red, even more than Hanabi.
Ah! Suna's moans grew louder and louder. How can they be having sex like that? Before the wedding? Kushina roared with jealousy.
I'm pregnant with Minato's child, you should know these things can happen.
Makoto shrugged. I know.
But you two have been sleeping together in the same bed for months. I know that a man and a woman eventually give in to carnal acts.
Kushina murmured. If you're dissatisfied, then have sex with him.
It's not like the wedding isn't going to happen, sometimes we have sex when we're alone.
Makoto said, and both girls looked at her in surprise. What? Since when? You're pregnant. Kushina murmured incredulously. I'm pregnant, and I have desires. Minato is a great lover.
He's affectionate and loving, he knows how to leave a woman full of longing for him.
Makoto opened a smile filled with tenderness. Kushina didn't change the color of her face upon hearing that. Ah! Let them have sex in peace. Suna seems to be loving it.
Makoto said as she returned her attention to the food on the stove.
Kushina looked at Hanabi, and the two understood each other's gaze. Without saying anything else, both ran upstairs while Makoto only sighed. I'm not going to see this, I'm going to sleep. Kurama's voice echoed as Kushina ran upstairs.
She felt Kushina's emotions become completely uncontrolled at the mention of sex, and hearing Suna moan made her go see what was happening, thinking Kushina could be in danger or something serious had happened, and in the end, not liking at all what it was turning into.
What are you doing looking? I don't want you to see, not even when I have this with Minato. Kushina roared. Do you think I'm interested in human mating? Lock me in a cage again, but don't let me see this under any circumstances. Kurama roared and went to sleep. Kushina, a little surprised by the fox's response, continued approaching the bedroom with Hanabi. Ah! How do you think they're doing it? Kushina couldn't help but ask, curious and embarrassed. Ah! I don't know. Hanabi commented shyly. How do you not know? You have your Byakugan, why don't you look? Kushina asked as they stopped at the doorway. Ah! I'll try. Hanabi seemed unsure, but nodded.
The moment the veins appeared around her eyes, she fixed her gaze on the room. Her eyes widened immediately, while her face turned even redder. She seemed to open her mouth like a fish before looking at Kushina. She couldn't even speak before turning her attention back to the room.
Lemon scene happened. Chapter 340, A Bond of Chakras. Third-person POV.
Yuzushiovicure, the floating island, 42. Minato saw Tsuna faint right after the act and the orgasm they had shared together. She looked tired, breathless, with her breathing a bit irregular. She didn't faint just because of the sex, he thought out loud as he looked at the beautiful blonde.
Did my chakra affect her that much?
He didn't stop murmuring, because he knew that having sex with someone was basically sharing one's spirit with the other. At least that was what he had discovered since coming to the ninja world, and he noticed it when he started having sex with Makoto. They would always merge their chakras. That should be why, in Minato's opinion, people love differently than in the other world. Here there wasn't much betrayal, and usually, when someone got attached to another person still in childhood, they carried that feeling for the rest of their life. One example was Hinata, who had always loved Naruto since the Ninja Academy, even though he had already confessed to another person. After all, Naruto loved Sakura for most of the story in the manga. She would sacrifice her life for him, something no woman from Minato's original world would do. No woman would sacrifice herself for a man. And all the girls who were his fiancées had become romantically attached to him since the academy. And knowing a bit more after having his second sexual partner, Minato was beginning to see that the fact that this chakra mixing should make women cautious about their life partner, generally chosen as the only one, also explained why there was much less promiscuity in the ninja world. Anyway, Minato set those thoughts aside and checked whether Suna was alright, sensing the chakra inside her, which still seemed somewhat volatile. That was why she had fainted. His chakra, especially the light and life type, the yang type, was stirring her chakra in a way that shouldn't be normal, and Minato became worried. There hadn't been anything like that with Makoto, although he had also found it a bit strange that her chakra reacted a little to his yang. Maybe that was normal, like how Madara had needed Hashirama's chakra, which must have been quite rich in yang, to awaken his Rinnegan, so Makoto might have been reacting to that as well. This made Minato think a little as he looked at Suna. She was a senju with the water and earth elements, perfect for the wood-release Kekkai Genkai, but just those combinations weren't enough. The key was yang itself, the element of life. If Minato was transferring yang to her, wasn't it possible for her to gain wood-release as well? He would have to see how she reacted in the next few days and check if there were any changes. Lastly, he didn't fail to touch her face and her waist with tenderness while she still wore a small smile on her lips. At least she wasn't in danger, she seemed happy and light. Minato couldn't help but have a satisfied smile upon seeing that his woman was pleased with the sex he had given her, and that made him happy. Anyway, his gaze went to the door as he stood up and grabbed a comforter to cover her. He knew Kushina and Hanabi were there watching, peeking ever since they arrived on the second floor. Minato didn't mind and continued giving his gentle taps to Tsuna with love until reaching the climax. She might not have even noticed, with her mind entirely focused on the act, because she would probably have panicked if she had known there were people listening to her moans. Something she would certainly find out when she woke up, since the girls wouldn't be able to hide it, with him sensing through his haki how they were whispering in the kitchen at that exact moment after what they had witnessed. Minato could only support her to keep her from feeling too embarrassed. Anyway, he covered her with a comforter so she could rest a bit. As for him, he took a bathtub out of the scroll. It only needed water, but since he didn't have a water release jutsu, he had to call Kushina to fill it, with a mischievous smile on his face. He put on a robe, still a bit sweaty, and went to the kitchen downstairs. He hadn't even reached the kitchen yet, but he already knew the girls were whispering among themselves. Or at least until he got close, because as soon as they sensed him, they simply stopped talking and seemed to go into maximum alert. Minato shrugged and slid the door open as the girls looked at him. Makoto raised an eyebrow at him, while Kushina had an electrically wide-eyed look full of questions. At the same time her face took on the same shade as her hair as she thought of her own questions. Hanabi immediately lowered her head, also becoming very red. She avoided looking at Minato in any way. Minato found the situation amusing and smiled. "So, Kushina," he began. "Could you help me upstairs? I need water for the bathtub, and I don't usually store that kind of thing in storage scrolls." In truth, he did have water, he would never fail to store basic necessities like what was needed for a bath, but he didn't want to miss the chance to tease Kushina. "You want water? But, wait, why don't you get it fro?" She immediately jumped as soon as Minato spoke to her, stammering. Hanabi raised an eyebrow, while Makoto looked about to laugh. "You know. It's easier for you to spit into the bathtub." "I need to take a bath. I ended up getting sweaty from reading Makoto upstairs," Minato said, still smiling. Makoto began to laugh, and Hanabi stared at him wide-eyed. "You liar!" Kushina roared at the blatant lie they had heard him. "Liar? Of course I was," he said. "Suna and I were studying in Uzumaki scroll, but it was a bit difficult, that's why I'm a bit sweaty." "Liar! Liar! 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 Databane!" Kushina repeated, standing up from the chair with her face even redder than her hair. Minato raised an eyebrow and pretended to be confused. "Wasn't I? Then what was I doing with Suna?" "Wait, unless you knew what Suna and I were doing," he asked with false innocence. Kushina turned pale upon hearing that. "And no. Of course not. It's not like we were spying on you." "No, but we could hear the moans from the room even from here." "That's it. We heard them, Databane." "It didn't sound like you two were reading tools," she babbled, completely lost in her own words. Makoto began to laugh. It was obvious she knew Minato was teasing the redhead.
Seriously, the scroll was a bit difficult, you know? Maybe you could even help us if you want to study with me, he said. Suddenly, Kushina froze, going from pale to red once again. She was completely paralyzed. Minato, seeing that, wondered if he had perhaps gone too far by simply inviting her to have sex. Well, why don't you just help me with the bathtub? Just that. I need water, you know. I'm stinking. And you don't want me sitting at the table smelling like this, right? Minato said now in a calmer tone. Kushina, still frozen, just nodded. She finally moved, left the table like a robot, looked at Minato with suspicion, and then headed for the stairs, leaving him behind. Minato saw this and looked at the two girls. I think I went too far, he said. Well, even Kushina breaks under certain jokes, Minato. You shouldn't do that to her, Makoto said, still laughing softly. Well, I couldn't finish reading all the scrolls with Tsuna, I was thinking you could help me. Minato said in a lighter tone to Makoto, with whom he could joke without any embarrassment. Oh, sure, I'd love to read those scrolls. We can do that after dinner, Makoto said, giving him a wink, while Hanabi stared at the two of them as if they were two animals in heat. Can you two stop that? We know what you're talking about, the Hyuga said, blushing. You talk as if this weren't normal among us. You will also have sex with Minato. Isn't that what you want? Makoto teased Hanabi. I know. But we don't just say those things openly. It's your intimacy, she growled. Our family's intimacy. We share the same man, you should get used to it. Makoto countered, and Minato sighed. In the end, Minato turned and went up the stairs, while Kushina was filling the bathtub, not with saliva, but with clean water through one of her water-release jutsu. She kept glancing at Tsuna in the corner of the room, sleeping on the futon with the comforter Minato had placed over her. Tsuna still wore the same unconscious smile, and Minato noticed that Kushina had 1,000 questions in her eyes, but also a certain shine. She looked at Tsuna's happy expression and wondered internally if it was really that good. When Minato walked in, Kushina straightened up, finishing filling the bathtub. She looked at him full of embarrassment, there was desire and caution in her gaze. Finished here, Minato laughed at the silly girl who didn't answer, and he pointed to a corner of the room. So, do you believe me? Look at the open scroll over there that we were studying to exhaustion, Minato said, pointing to the scroll Tsuna had been reading before they attacked each other, though it was nothing like what Minato was describing. I don't believe you, Kushina murmured, looking away. Anyway, I'm going to take a bath, Minato shrugged, removing the robe and stepping into the tub. Her eyes returned to the robe being taken off and falling to the floor. She stayed there, unable to look directly at his body. She could have left, but she didn't. She stayed, watching, while her eyes involuntarily drifted to his intimate area as he sat in the bathtub. Kushina was very curious. Minato picked up some products Tsuna had used earlier to bathe and relaxed. He shot another glance at Kushina standing beside him. Hey, could you help me with my back? He asked. Kushina widened her eyes, slightly surprised by the request, but she didn't seem willing to refuse. I'll do it, Databane, she said, picking up the sponge and beginning to scrub his back. Minato let out a light laugh. What are you laughing at? She murmured, a bit more flushed. Nothing. I just like your touch, he said. Don't say things like that, she whispered, complaining softly. Why shouldn't I say it? You don't like touching me, he challenged her. Of course I do. But don't be so direct, she grumbled, earning another laugh from him. You're my wife, or at least you're going to be. You'll get used to it soon. I'm just trying to break the tension, he said, now no longer teasing her as he relaxed. She stayed silent, but broke it a few seconds later, running her hand across his chest. It's true, she began. Do you like my touch? If I didn't, I'd be a crazy man, he said, turning his face toward her. Kushina kissed him, taking the initiative the moment she heard his answer. Minato responded with a kiss more passionate than any he had ever given her. In the end, Minato and Kushina went downstairs for dinner.
They stayed only with the kisses. Kushina didn't seem prepared to have sex there, not after Minato had been with Suna.
They ate Makoto's food, and Suna finally joined them.
She had taken a bath since Minato had asked Kushina to replace the water in the tub and leave it clean for her to wash herself.
Suna was just as flushed, sitting at the table while occasionally looking at Minato as he talked with Makoto.
He always offered her a smile and a wink, leaving Suna quite nervous, a behavior very different from her usual self, since she was always loud and energetic. She didn't know if she would break the table, but she certainly broke her utensils, having to replace them a few times.
Obviously, Minato noticed she seemed confused and they needed to talk. He took her to a corner of the island after dinner and gently explained that everything was fine between them. I understand all of this.
I just feel a little nervous, she whispered in the end.
Nervous about what? About me?
Or about the girls who heard you and me climax behind the door in the middle of the act?
Minato asked. Don't mention them. She looked like she wanted to die of embarrassment upon hearing that from Minato. I just wanted to know if things are okay.
I can't stop thinking about it, about us, she said with a certain insecurity. She was afraid of losing everything she had built with Minato, because everything felt so strange now. Minato took the initiative and kissed her lightly on the lips, making Suna open her eyes in surprise.
Everything is fine. I loved what we did.
It was special and very pleasant, he replied, touching her cheek.
I loved it too.
I loved it, to be honest, she said, blushing.
Well, that's what a man and a woman do when they love each other.
You and I are like that, and we're going to do it often, or so I hope, he said, laughing.
I would also like to do it often, she admitted. Good, then we'll continue whenever we can, just like I always do with Makoto. Now let's go back.
Tomorrow we have a new day, and I intend to go to the Dragon Clan, since Guren invited me, Minato said, while Suna nodded, opening a smile overflowing with happiness. But something had changed between them, and she knew it.
Suna held his hand and squeezed it with more tenderness and freedom than she had ever shown before.
She had become much more affectionate with him than she had ever been, even though she had already loved him before. She felt she never wanted to let him get away from her again. The bond created in that act had brought them closer than ever and, for some reason, Suna felt different. Her chakra seemed to have changed thanks to Minato. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated as Minato Namikaze.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned.
Quick reminder.
The series What If Transmigrated into One Piece and became a Marine will be going on hold soon, since we're nearly at the end of the story. So now, I need your help picking the next project for the channel.
I'm currently deciding between these 3 fanfics. What if creating the strongest Strawhat crew by reading manga? What if a venerated soul reincarnated in Danmachi world? What if transmigrated and taking over Ichigo's body? Please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next. I'll take the top pick and start working on that series next.
Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.